Perfect. We're finally ready to start talking about grids in the context of actual products. So I took a couple of screenshots from Mobbin. I probably mentioned it already. If not, it's a great website that you can find screenshots from realistic projects that real designers with a lot of experience have worked on. So those are the designs that I usually like to inspect when I'm thinking about things. And I grabbed a couple of iOS app screenshots and also some screenshots from Android side to analyze the grids that they're following when it comes to mobile design. One thing about all of the screenshots is they're kind of 3 times the size than the size that we would design on. So just keep that in mind and kind of divide everything by 3 to get the realistic sizes. I'm gonna clean this up a little bit so it's easier for us to look at all of them. And they're gonna be images, so we can't really place a grid on it to inspect it. So I'm just gonna turn all of them into frames like this, just to give you a sense of everything that you need to do before you start analyzing a grid. So I'm gonna go inside, I'm gonna put in a layout grid, and I'm gonna move to columns. When it comes to mobile design, especially on mobile apps, as I've said, like most likely you're gonna need just 1 column or 2 columns and not something more. You can definitely put in 12. It won't make a lot of difference. I just want to say that most likely you're going to have some elements that are going to be either like 1, 2, 4, sometimes 8, maybe 12 is going to be a little bit too much. So you can just put in 1 column and let's figure out what the margins are. So the left and right side, most often, as you see, I put down 16, and that's kind of the most common thing that you're going to see on both iOS and Android apps. Sometimes it goes to 20 or 24 depending on like is it more of a brand that kind of allows for more of that space or not, but just something to keep in mind. Since we only have 1 column, I'm not going to focus on Gather a lot, but as you can see, what they're doing is all of the elements that are contained in here are inside of those guidelines that we have now. And there is a sense of alignment from the left edge and right edge, and it's all working well together. When it comes to these elements, they're not kind of following a grid. It's just like this particular card that we have in here is this size, and between them, they're going to have another card and another card. Now, I'm hoping I got this right, and it seems like I did. And basically, they just have like from left to right, based on how many of these currencies you have active, you're gonna have the cards for them on top. What you're gonna notice in here, there's a spacing of 10, but if we look at the item in here, it's 16. So I'm not really understanding why they used a 10 when for most of these other things, it seems like they're following the guidelines of 8, but I'll leave it up to their team. Maybe when they tested it, or people complained that there was too few spacing if they used an 8, and if they used 16, it's going to be too much. So they just kind of settled on 10. Again, not using a hard grid. They're just kind of thinking about the spacing of these elements and what works best in the context in here. As someone who uses Wise, I know that I never noticed or analyzed like, oh, these cards seem like they're 2 pixels too close or too far apart. So some of those things are maybe just things that we as designers worry about. And if you're really into consistency, you're wondering why it's not happening in here. But honestly, visually, when I looked at it, I never like wondered, is it like 8 or 10 or 12 or 16 between those? So it's just showing you that maybe sometimes we're sacrificing like consistency with the numbers just because we want it visually to be better. So, okay, in here, I'm guessing that they have some kind of a container for all of those icons. So all of those icons are in frames of 24. And yeah, to give each icon enough space around it so that it's tappable, because on phones, like you're usually striving to get to like 40, 44, 48 to have enough space for something to be tappable with our fat fingers that we have. I'm guessing that they added another 24 of spacing between all of them to kind of ensure that you're not accidentally hitting this if you wanted to tap on search. So as you can see, there's really no need for something else. If we introduced more columns like this, I'm probably gonna make the gutter a little bit smaller. You see that nothing is basically falling onto that. If we had 3, really not. 4, still not. So maybe if they have 12, yeah, not even there are these things falling onto some kind of a grid, unless they have some wild gutters like 16 or something. But yeah, still, even if I use 10, which is something that they used in here, it doesn't seem like it's falling into something. So I'm just guessing that they probably have like 1 column grid or maybe 2 column grid that they're using for everything, and that's it. It's just helping them align things, because most of these items are just going to fall one below the other, and you're going to see that on phones a lot. Okay, so let's move to this other example that we have in here. I never used this app, but I noticed is when I was scrolling through Mobbin, it looked a little bit different from a lot of the apps that I have personally worked on. So I just wanted to inspect the grid a little bit. Let's go back in. Let's put in the columns. Let's put in 12 for this one, because it seems like there is some kind of a plane here. I think that maybe they're using, they're even using 12. So they really want a lot of space for all of this content that they have in here. And let me see if it's maybe 8 or like, is it 16 maybe? Some of these things might fall onto 16. Let me just figure out first what the size of this in here is. So it's 10. Let's see if it's consistent in here as well. It's not. In here it's 8. So I'm guessing that they're not really, unless I made a mistake in here. Oh yeah, I made a mistake, sorry about it. So it seems like the spacing that they have between elements is 8. So I'm gonna put in 8 as the gutter and just see if there's like a number where the gutters actually fall onto those places. Maybe if they're using 7, but that's a stretch. It doesn't seem like it. It just seems like they're most likely having like 1 or 2 columns for all of the content, and then when it comes to it, they pick a width that they want to have for a particular card, and then just have a soft grid between them with a spacing of 8. Because all of these items are going outside of the screen, so you can't really feed them into a grid that's just sticking to the screen size that we have. So what you're going to notice a lot in mobile products especially is that the items are going to start on the line in here, and then they're just going to repeat from left to right for how many rows and columns of items that they're going to have, and the spacing in here is going to be what's consistent, and also the width of the elements. So basically that's the logic that you're going to follow a lot on mobile phones as well. Why I wanted to show you Airbnb is I wanted to show you that they actually have, even if they're using 1 or 2 columns or whatever they have as a spacing system, they're using a bigger margin. They want you to feel luxurious kind of when you're scrolling through it. And you can see that everything is basically starting at this point, and it's kind of following it very correctly. Besides the navbar here on the bottom, but it's kind of a native element that they just made work for themselves, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. And you can see that they're not really worried about making all of these feel like they're spaced consistently. They're trying to kind of figure out where the visual points of interest are, and I'm guessing that they're spacing these based on some kind of a block in here. Maybe not even that, who knows. Or maybe I just have it like 1 pixel wrong. But overall, it seems like they're not worried about the text, they're worried about centering the icons, and then the text, however long it is, it's going to appear below it. When it comes to all of the other elements, they're either stuck to the left side of here or the right side, or they're in an element that's stretching from the left and right edge of this one column grid that they have, and they just have some kind of a spacing rule in here from the top right. So you're picking one point of reference, like top right, and you're going to space this down 16 pixels, and this from the right edge 16 pixels again, and you're going to get to a point where you're spacing things inside of cards and elements like this. So that's what they're doing in here. You're going to see the same thing in here. There's some kind of a reference point is this bottom left corner, and the spacing in here is the one that's set. Everything else depends on what you have that you want to reference. And in here I added a version of this screen but for Android, just to kind of compare the differences in sizing. The only noticeable difference is kind of the shadow is a little bit more harsher here on the Android size, and Android has a predefined shadow rules that it's following, because a lot of material design is based on the references of like shadows and light and how it's working. But everything else seems to be pretty much similar. You can see that in here. Even the nav bar options, maybe this font is a little bit bolder, but overall, like, everything's really following this app. If you're using it on iOS or Android, it's gonna look and work pretty much the same. Some of the controls are maybe more native with some of the pop-ups or something that happen inside of the app, but most of the app is gonna be working and looking the same. And it's kind of the strategy that a lot of startups and also products that you're going to work on as a mobile app designer are going to follow, because you want to achieve consistency with your product and also with the operating system that you're designing for, but you don't want to kind of just follow the native guidelines of a particular platform. So in here, I'm guessing that they also used margins of 24, or maybe not. Maybe it's a little bit smaller. Yeah, it seems like it's 22. Maybe it's just on this size of the screen. But it seems like it's a little bit smaller on the Android size. And what I know about Airbnb, I think they're developing most things through React Native, which is kind of maybe too deep of a topic for this video and for this course. But that means that they're using one development library in a sense, and kind of one way of developing things, and they're exporting from that one source of code into two apps. So it's not a native, in a sense, Android and iOS app. It's a hybrid app that's built with that kind of system in mind. So maybe one of the reasons for some of this consistency between the two platforms are also coming from the fact that they're using one way to design it all. And a lot of the startups and apps are doing the same thing. All of the three examples in here are following Android app screenshots. So let's just see if there's some kind of a big difference in here. Since this is kind of looking a little bit smaller. Oh, maybe even smaller than that. Yeah, maybe they're using 15 to align all of their content. So this is Booking. It's on Android. It seems like the margin on the left and right side is 15, which I haven't seen a lot. I've seen it on some iOS apps before, because as you know, a lot of iOS screens are 375. So sometimes I would see, instead of like using 8 as a base number, a lot of apps would use 5 as a base number to get to the 375 point. But yeah, in here we're working with an Android phone and seeing 15. Maybe I know that Booking does squeeze in a lot of things, and they sacrifice white space a lot, even on their websites where they have a lot of space. So maybe that's just like one of the reasons for it. In here, one inconsistency I see is this search kind of going outside of it, but maybe that's just kind of a development glitch that someone noticed when they were screenshotting this. Again, it seems like most of the apps that we're looking into, independent of the platform they're designed for, are following the same logic of using either one or two columns. Yeah, I don't see a reason for the screen at all to have more columns, unless we're just trying to think of like, ooh, are they fitting this image into a particular column? I'm guessing not. Most likely it's that they've used just one column. They have a gutter on the left side and the margin on the left side and right side, and everything else is going to fit in here, and then just pick the width and height of this image, and the rest of the space is just like white space. When it comes to Tumblr, which is the example I have for Android in here, I've picked it for a couple of reasons. One of them is you can see different spacing rules in here between the tags and between these tags, but the blogs in here seems to be a little bit wider, and then they follow some kind of a spacing rule in here as well. Again, we can maybe mark it and figure out what it is. Most likely it's either like 7 or 8. It's not falling into the right pixel, so I'm not sure what it is. But you can see that these are definitely following some kind of a system between these items, while still none of them are really falling into one sense of alignment and some kind of a thing that would suggest that they're using a multi-column grid in here. Another thing that you can also notice is that in here there doesn't seem to be a strict grid, even though they're having 3 items in a row that are immediately visible. Well, 2 plus, let's say 50, 60, 70% of the third card is visible, while in another place in the app where you have to upload a photo, it's really following a strict grid. So you can see that in here there's definitely 3 columns. The gutter is something really small. I think even smaller than 8. Maybe it's 4. Not perfect yet, but that's because of the margins. I forgot to introduce those. And yeah, it seems like it's 1, 2, 3, 4 pixels. So 4. And you can see that everything, all of those images are following a grid that's 3 columns, and margins and gutters are just really small at 4 to give a lot more space for the photos to be seen, instead of wasting it on the spacings, because the spacings are really harsh with this dark blue background. So why I wanted to show you that is because this is definitely not following the same grid as this, even though it's the same app. And you're going to see the same things on websites as well, where if a screen and if the context of the screen requires it, you can switch the grid there. Don't worry about it. So for example, if you have a beautiful website and you're following some kind of a grid there, you don't have to follow that same grid for blog articles, because blog articles are really meant to be read and not kind of scroll through and get visually inspired. So you need to ensure that your grid works for the context of the reading of the text that you have. So I just wanted to stress that out, because if a screen requires it, you're feel free to change the grid and not follow the grid that you have everywhere else. Most likely you're not going to do it a lot, but there might be a context where your grid is limiting you, so overcome it by changing it. Okay, so now we've analyzed a lot of the mobile app screens. I just want to show you how I would approach building some grid for a mobile app or a responsive website. I know that we haven't really taken a look at the responsive websites yet, but let's say that you want to work on something like this. It's a really common iPhone screen size or an Android screen size, and you're building an app that's going to be used on both platforms. So what you might do is you might go in here, create a grid. You can place in columns. Most often I would use 2, just because I often kind of foresee some kind of like cards, left and right cards that are repeating. So I just want to ensure that I have that case covered. And I'm gonna make the gutter smaller than the margins. So if I have margins at 16 by default, I might make gutter 8 or 12. Or if I have margins that are a little bit bigger, like 24, I'm probably gonna use 12 in here. And I'm gonna let you know why, because sometimes when you're designing, you might design cards like this that are repeating across your grid. When you're working with mobile phones on iOS, like 375 ones, that means that your columns are not going to be the same width like this. You can see this one is 157, this one is 158. Most likely in a real case scenario, it's going to be 157 times 157.5, and this one is going to be 157.5, but it's not really possible to replicate in Figma, so just keep that in mind. It's not going to be like fully perfect, but keep it in your mind when you're designing. And in here, this is why I would do the gutter smaller than the columns, because now you can see that the part of the third card is showing. So if you want to achieve that, you can easily achieve it by ensuring that the gutter is smaller than the columns. But yeah, most of the times when you have something in your mobile app, you're going to have an element that's just stretching from left to right edge. The margins are going to stay consistent. And then when you're going to be placing elements inside, so if I do something like this, if I have a title in here, I might place the title in here. I might have some kind of an avatar or something, and I'm going to be looking at reference points. So I'm going to be looking at this and this. Since it's a mobile app, I might have to make this smaller. I'm going to basically center this like this, and and ensure that the soft spacing and soft grid that I'm using inside of this element is just something that's divisible by 4. Then I might have some kind of an icon in here on this side, and I'm gonna space it like this, and it's gonna basically, when I'm placing those elements, and since this is a rectangle, maybe I made a mistake, but I'm gonna make it a frame. I'll just copy the style from the rectangle I had before to the frame itself. I'm going to place this on top left. This is going to be top left. This is going to be right top. And I might have text in here that's stretching from left to right edge. And I'm just going to have it as left and right. And I'm going to have this element stretch from left and right. So those things are kind of spaced out. So if I'm adjusting this to a larger phone, you can see how easy it is to actually do it right now, because I made all of those constraints that I have in here. And you have multiple lines of text. You can do it like this, and you can see that it's really easy to space things now based on the width of the screen. So that's how I would look at mobile design. I would not worry too much about this hard grid that we placed on ourselves. I would worry more about ensuring that the spacing inside of these elements is consistent and kind of works with the content that we want to present. When it comes to the mobile design, you can just basically copy the grid in here as well, and it should work on Android as well. And when it comes to responsive web, sometimes, especially on very visual and inspirational websites, I might actually keep it at 12. I would just make gutters really, really small, like 8 or 12, whatever works best, and ensure that the margins are either 16, 20, or 24, whatever works for you. And then you might be able to work with more complex grids like this, where you want this image just to be a part of this, and then this next one to be something like this. Again, spacing rules between them are following our soft grid rules and kind of 8-point grid or 4-point grid, but it gives you the flexibility to do more of that editorial type look that some of the websites, responsive websites, require. So those are the things that I'm thinking about when I'm planning a grid for a mobile app or a mobile responsive web. And I do that to ensure that the content that I'm working with works well. So even if I set some rules for myself in the beginning, depending on the first 10 or 15 important screens that I design, I might actually adjust the grid a little bit. So don't worry, don't make the grid limit you in any shape or form. Use the grid to ensure consistency, alignment, and hierarchy, but adjust it to your needs and adjust it to the content that you're working with and what you're presenting to the user.